We want a UBI, you want autonomous systems like Ethereum and Bitcoin to redistribute value to the edges continuously.
One of our graduates, Sharon Silverman, is interested in the intersection of psychology with the themes that you're talking about. And she has two questions, but let me put them to you together. One is about, do you think that the polarization that you described in terms of speech and the views of the public is a result of fear, the fear about the fourth industrial revolution and the dire threat of the so-called Anthropocene? And if you see that linkage, what do you think we can do about that fear? Is there a way that you see that we can respond to the psychology and the influence of that psychology? Let me stop there. I can share her other question after.
Sure. I think that's a fantastic question. So just to say a few words about how the human psyche is affected by essentially, let's say, late stage capitalism or things that are moving forward. We used to all have traditional societies where we all lived communally, you know, because there wasn't enough housing. Families would live together, grandparents, parents, and so on. Many traditional societies around the world still live this way. But in our good economy, both parents work. They're encouraged to both lean in, have 40-hour work weeks, 60-hour work weeks. The kids are being put in schools to be taken care of by public schools and raising them to be good corporate workers. Now the thing is, and the parents are often put in nursing homes. The parents who raised you don't necessarily have time for them. So the breakdown is also that we don't have a support structure. There's a book called Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, talks about the breakdown of American society. Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that people prefer to get the latest technology and have shiny new things rather than live the way their grandparents did in the 50s with a home and a nice car for many years and fix the car. They'd rather buy the new car. So the point being that this whole thing is shaped. It's not just the news media, it's the whole system is shaping the individual and the society. So it is a fact that the world is changing. We don't know if the polar ice caps will melt. They just found that Australia had plants in the last million years. So clearly the ice was only there for a million years, it looks like. But the point being that these things will happen. We need to solve them collectively. And we cannot solve them necessarily when every person is acting in their own individual self-interest. We've tried that and we've seen what happened with the Dust Bowl during the Great Depression, when farmers would work the land to the bone because they needed to make more, they had a good work ethic, but they were all in the race to the bottom, and the negative externalities on the land multiplied. So I would say—
back to Sharon's question just for a second, and I want one sentence from you, and I'm sure Gaston would agree with me as well. Fear, relationship of fear and the newest technology, does it exist?
I would say fear is just a byproduct of essentially selling things. If you look at the Republican convention of 2016, it was mostly fear. They're coming for you. We're the last land on earth. We need to make sure that these other guys don't win. That's an example. You can see fear on the Democratic side, fear of Trump's administration and so on. Whether or not the fear is overblown or not is not the point. The point is it's amplified by the profit motive because that's what sells. Fear causes you to vote a certain way. It causes you to consume more media. And there's even a concept where you're scrolling. I forgot what the concept is called. You're scrolling. It's like with fear, and you're just getting more and more fearful.
Okay, I'm sure we have a lot of questions. So can we have the second one from Sharon then?
Yeah. Sure. Let me try to pose two worries, and they're coming from a different perspectives. But one worry that Sharon also raises is there just this desire for strong leaders? Do the masses just want kind of strong leaders and is that the reason why we get this concentration of power? And then to kind of look at it from the other side, she's concerned that the open source patents, would those discourage investment in innovation in a way that actually cements the power of the powerful?
So it is a great question. If you ask Thomas Jefferson, he would not have had those patents. He was a big believer that, I think he said, if you light your taper from mine, your flame from mine, you don't diminish mine, But the thing is that whether we advance through collaborative projects like the rest of science does, when Newton said, I stood on the shoulders of giants, that's how I was able to see further. He didn't rent the shoulders and he didn't pay royalties to the shoulders to the giants. The thing is, although he said it as a pun on a short guy. The point being that the idea is that we can proceed with collaboration, and I think in the long term it produces better results, as we've seen with Linux, with Wikipedia. And look, I know people that criticize Wikipedia for being entrenched, and I will say that when you move from capitalist structures to socialist structures, and I said there are other alternatives besides these two, you're trading one set of elites, which is the capitalist boards of Google and Facebook sitting on each other's boards and the pension funds, to people with a lot of shares, to the people with a lot of political clout. And you're basically having unelected bureaucrats in a pyramid of worker unions voting for in a federated system. And at the top of the pyramid is the party, and you have other set of elites. I am saying we want a UBI, we want autonomous systems like Ethereum and Bitcoin to redistribute value to the edges continuously. And no one owns the system, and the rules are set in the beginning. And essentially, we want to remove the concentrations of power as much as we can. And it's a constant battle: decentralization versus centralization. It never ends.
No doubt. Our colleague in risk management, Adrian Studer, is asking about, I guess, national decentralization, and points out that there are countries that do take measures to limit access of citizens to global service providers, and is in order to concentrate their reliance on domestic service providers. Do you think that this is a move that goes in the open source direction that you would promote, or is this counterproductive in your view?
Well, look, I want free competition, except where we need to solve collective action problems, like the farmers creating the Dust Bowl, or plastic, being shifting from glass bottles to non-biodegradable plastic. We do need to impose externalities and internalize the cost back to those companies. But in general, the countries are monopolies of force in general in their jurisdiction. So if you're saying they're restricting, like China restricts with the Great Firewall, whatever's coming in, well, there you have it. You have a monopoly that's been previously established. Like I said, you have to go one step back. The country then is the monopoly, and whatever it does is distorting what otherwise people would maybe choose to consume this or that. My issue isn't with what they choose to consume. My issue is that we're placing too much responsibility on the individual to recycle plastic straws and bags and ban them, when upstream, nobody's talking about how these companies are essentially not shifting to biodegradable materials. They are essentially externalizing the cost to all of us. And similarly, when Facebook interrupts us during the dinner, that's a tragedy of the commons, because if they didn't do it, Twitter will do it, or others will do it, and the system will select for the ones that do it the most. And whether it's factory farms or plastic or pollution, they're collective action problems. We need to solve those with some force or taxes. But when it comes to restricting things in your country, the question is, perhaps there is too much power given to the government to be able to restrict you in the first place. There should instead be alternatives. There should be, instead of breaking up Facebook, how about having open source alternatives to Facebook and putting billions of dollars into making them successful? Then we won't need government action, because we will have viable alternatives to capitalist news and
we'll have grassroots democratization of the internet and information. That's what you are effectively referring to.
I'm advocating for every country, Russia, China included, and others, to commit massive, not massive, you just need $1 billion, as opposed to the trillions that they spend, $1 billion to open source development. And by the way, they can attract, Russia has so many Russian-speaking programmers, they can attract it back to write documentation in Russian and to have a robust system, just like the Chinese have and the US has. They need to commit, the governments need to sponsor non-profit motive collaborative projects. That's how we're going to get society be healthier again. That's my recommendation.